All right, everyone. So welcome to Speak Online. Tonight, we are going to be looking at and reviewing J.D. Vance's recent speech at the Munich conference and taking a look at the different themes that he will be discussing. In particular, the themes that exist in Russian propaganda. So, to give a taste of what's to come, and well, I do love making a point in creative fashions, and to show that this is balanced, I thought that it would be a good idea to take this speech, the transcript, and the link, upload it into Grok 3, because as Elon Musk recently said when he put this out, the new program, that we want truth and we don't want to live in denial. So I asked it to review it, and let me show you part of the response. Here we go. I just want everybody to see this. So if you cannot see this, right now I have up on screen the output from that request to Grok. And here's what it said. The comparison with Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda often portrays Western countries as corrupt and in decline, focusing on similar themes to destabilize Europe. Both share immigration criticism, highlighting it as a security and cultural issue, election integrity, accusing Europe of undemocratic actions like canceling elections, speech repression, claiming Europe restricts conservative views. The implications noted by Grok, this overlap is significant, as it shows how certain narratives can be co-opted by different actors, potentially amplifying anti-European sentiments. While Vance expresses political views, Russia's intent is strategic, aiming to weaken European unity. Isn't that interesting, Zach?
Very interesting. Now, before we proceed, what exactly is Grok, maybe for people that don't know?
Well, Grok 3 is the updated version of Grok 2. It is an AI application. So, in theory, because it's basing its results on the information provided, it should be unbiased.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think that's good, and I think it gets a good point across.
So it basically took all the transcript from his speech and analyzed it, like an AI analyzed it, and then produced this result after it analyzed the speech.
Correct.
Okay.
It took those themes that it found and compared it to the information on the web that demonstrates Russian propaganda. So the themes that it finds from Russian propaganda happens to be the same.
Exactly what his speech was. Imagine that.
Good stuff, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, you could say it's good stuff.
The AI is good. The speech was bad.
Yeah, but I would just like to personally thank Elon Musk for helping us find the truth. Good man. Good man. All right, let's get to the video.
Of the United States, Mr. J.D. Vance, who was here last year as senator, and we are very happy that he has come back to Munich, and we are very much looking forward to his speech. Please welcome.
So one of the reasons why I stated some of the key points that are popular in Russian propaganda is to view this speech from that frame, to see the message that is truly being delivered, to hear the intent, right? Not just the claims, but the intent behind this. Now, does this necessarily mean that he has the same intents as Russian propaganda? Not necessarily. I did do a video in the past showing how these messages align and bring about a result that does support both the parties, right? Like, for example, winning an election. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and it would be good to say, like, you know, for anyone watching this to just take a step back and just try, even if you are a loyal supporter of the president and everything, or you're totally against whatever it might be, just try to look at the information he's delivering in a speech. Just try to stop. Just look at it from a step back.
And the effects of it.
Yes.
Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now,
good message. Good message.
Starting off good, yeah.
Yep.
Sounds wonderful.
I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about...
They're slacking, right? They're slacking. I would love to tell that to an entire group, being like, hey, come on, it's time to up the ante a little bit.
Step up their own defense.
Yeah.
There
is that old saying, you know, to know your audience. But hey, I give them props for going for it.
Vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values.
Okay, so this is one of the main themes, right? The election annulments. But the bigger message here when it comes to Russian propaganda is the doubting of democratic values and institutions. That's a big one.
Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections.
Here's the freedom of speech restrictions, that theme.
They the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this...
They should have just went with propaganda. Keep going?
Yes,
okay, keep
sir,
going. All right. Are you trying to figure out how to say it in a reasonable fashion?
Yes.
I get it.
Because this is America endorsing the fact that it believes that democracy is weak in Europe.
Right.
It's America's endorsement. And if that's not pro-Russia, then I don't know what is. Even though he's saying all these things, like everybody, not everybody, a lot of people listening to this would be like, he's saying Russia was bad. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have won the Cold War. They were tyrannical. He's saying Russia's bad. But the bigger message is America's endorsement that democracy is threatened in Europe.
Well, it's about attacking the values and ideals, right? And that's another big thing that comes up is the support for nationalist movements. That is a big one. Amplifying the right-wing and anti-immigration sentiments because it creates division.
Very country where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where
This is another huge one too, because it ties into the even bigger theme, I would say, with the anti-feminism. Remember how you were talking about that book being banned? Yes. Right? It's a Christian fundamentalist value of what the family unit is expected to be, right?
Yes.
And you can see that in Project 2025, which I don't know if you know about, but we're going to get into it eventually, because one of the pillars is bringing back the standard model of what a family unit is.
Oh, like the nuclear family, like
exactly.
3.5 kids or 2.5 children and a wife. See, and also this, he's playing into being able to, he's supporting the ability of misinformation. He's building up to it,
right,
of being able to, we shouldn't push down misinformation, so that he is pushing for more, the ability to have misinformation.
Right. Yeah.
It's
a big deal. It really is.
And it's so slick, because if you're not stepping back and looking at what's actually happening, not just like chiming in on keywords and just blotting out what he's actually doing here, you'll miss it.
It's about the message.
Yes.
Weeks ago, the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith.
You know what? I got to take this chance just to hit the left a little bit. we do need to be able to have public discourse about topics. I understand the limitation of certain things, but there have been things that do not deserve such public scrutiny.
Yes, that is very acceptable.
Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sent.
What?
Okay.
He's using this cherry-picked event, which it might be true. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I suggest anybody who's watching this to look into it, because it may be true, and the way he's framing it, it does sound inappropriate, possibly. But the point is, cherry-picking one event to paint the entire image as this is happening to everybody, right? To everybody, is a manipulation tactic to push your agenda.
And if it's against the law, it's because, 200 meters, this guy was in 50 meters praying. Okay, what if there was 100 people within 50 meters praying? Right. That would very much dissuade somebody from going through with an abortion. That's why the law is there.
And that's the point, right?
But it sounds, when you say it, it doesn't sound that bad.
Right.
He's just praying.
Right.
But
and that is exactly the idea of that, because if someone is seeking those medical services, having that in front of you could stop you from seeking medical treatment, right?
Exactly. And yes.
Yeah.
It's already hard enough for it to go through with an abortion. It's not like,
Yeah.
To pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation.
Yeah, like with fact-checking, for example, right? And he'll probably go into this, I expect that he will, saying that fact-checkers are only fact-checking certain things. But one thing on here, by sending this message to the EU, which it will be much more dominant in their press because of his location and to whom he is speaking, in my opinion, what it's doing is, and its purpose is to reduce the disdain of the events that are occurring in the US in the European population.
Which is brilliant, right?
Yeah,
and
it's great.
I see, and he's relating some law about you can't pray in your own home to misinformation being scrutinized.
Right.
How is that? I mean,
like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
This decounting of Russian interference blows my mind. And also this 100K sort of thing is absolutely ridiculous. In the US, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars was spent via tenant media to pay influencers such as Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Laura Shen to promote a certain message. And what message is that? The same message that this guy is giving, because it breaks down and weakens U.S. democracy. And what's crazy is those audiences are primarily on the right. It blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind.
And okay, I would hope that if our intelligence agency found definitive proof that our election had been interfered with from Russian intelligence, I would hope they would annul that election.
Right.
Right? If our intelligence agency said, hey, our election was massively influenced by Russian intelligence and swayed, I would hope that it would be annulled.
Whew.
I would, if our intelligence agency.
I don't know if you could do that, though. I don't think you could. I don't think you could, because it's still people's choice.
Oh, that's what he's saying.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's people's choice.
Oh,
still.
So
if those people choose to consume that message and then therefore act upon it, then, I mean, that's their choice. You couldn't discount the democracy, all like the actual democratic election, but you can say it was influenced, right?
I misunderstood. I thought influence meant not the people, the actual electoral process.
Yeah.
This is the people.
Yes.
That's still
right. You can still make an argument for it. I get it.
Yes.
But
the people still chose, even though they chose with misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Losing the audience.
Now,
if you couldn't see this, you could hear it, but I think there was 3 people that clapped, and those were probably people being paid by him.
His wife.
Way to go, honey. You're killing it. Keep going.
the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again,
So that's about the support for the nationalist movements, right? That's what that's about.
Okay, so what he is setting up here, he's saying, okay, it's undemocratic to annul an election.
Mm-hmm.
It's undemocratic to have misinformation fact checked or not allowed to put out there. So he's setting the stage for misinformation to be put out there,
Mm-hmm.
and that our government or any government shouldn't be allowed to annul that election because the misinformation was consumed. But he's saying it should be allowed to be put out there.
Also, that we should accept it and not stop it, like taking away fact checking.
Yeah, we should accept it, not stop it, and vote upon the misinformation that we are consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if that's not Russian propaganda.
Oh yeah, they're killing it. They're killing it. Mad props for the strategy. I got to give it to you from someone with a degree in communication. Like, killing it.
And this is our vice president.
I know.
This is horrifying.
It's amazing.
Don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is
I think the end game is to push for states to secede from the Union, further reducing the military might of the U.S.
What?
Mm-hmm.
You mean like California become a own country?
Most likely Washington, Oregon, California, Western states to secede from the Union. It's actually come up. It's come up, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like the state of Jefferson type thing?
It's just, it's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Wow.
Incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way, or even worse, win an election. Now this...
Yeah.
That was, wait a minute, he said Russian word misinformation. It's bad, but listen to the misinformation. This is this slick.
It's good.
Wow.
Sell it.
Oh my God.
This is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we are defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourself.
What's up?
Here's another point. For Russia to look at an American vice president saying he is backing away from helping defend the European nations, that's also a step towards Russia.
Oh, absolutely.
Like hey.
Have you noticed that Ukraine is the bad guy now?
How's Ukraine the bad guy? They're just trying to defend themselves.
One of the recent talking points, and this just came out, is that the current president of Ukraine is now a tyrannical leader of sorts because they postpone the democratic election.
They're at war.
Yes, exactly, right? And postponing the election in times of war, right, is something that they are following based on their constitution. So, one, the majority opinion is in support of the current leader, so that is representing the majority of the people, just like if they were to vote for him. And two, they are following their constitution.
Which we shouldn't have any say over their constitution and how they follow
Right. But they're doing their thing. But
Yeah.
now a country in self-defense is the bad guy.
We had Franklin Delano Roosevelt ran for 4 terms, and that was after, like, during World War II, you know?
But still, just on that topic, it is amazing how much a single tweet or a single statement sent out into the populace can immediately change public discourse when it's just a few sentences taken at face value, right? It is absolutely amazing.
Which is the scary part about misinformation being allowed to just flow out there with no fact checks. Or like, did it say anything about this is their constitution if they're at war?
And putting misinformation on the same level of, let's say, journalism, of syndicated news platforms, right? It's crazy.
From, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you, nor for that matter.
They should. If, I mean, not run in fear, you know what I mean? Like, not, but they work for the voters. Like, that's, I wouldn't say fear, but that's who they work for, the people.
Right.
He is, like, the vice president is literally part of the governmental workforce for Americans. So that he should not be running in fear, but they should be, like, obviously respecting their voters.
They should be representing the people.
Yes.
That the people chose, you know, those elected to represent their beliefs, right? They should hold their best interests at heart.
Yes.
And their values.
This is hard to talk about without sounding some type of way.
Right.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump? You need...
For those who can't see it, there was a very interesting facial expression of a man who was listening in the audience.
And he looked like he could eat babies for breakfast.
He was not too happy about what he was hearing.
Democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern. Because
he just sort of threatened them if you're going to enjoy energy and secure supply chains.
Right.
That's coming from us.
Well, a big message in this is basically you need to align with our interests. Otherwise, you're not going to receive our support. And we heard that right in the beginning. Right?
Yes. And
like,
now,
your defense is primarily dependent upon us. Now, let me tell you everything you're going to do wrong or doing wrong. And if you don't align with us, you're no longer going to get that money.
Yeah. Or the energy or the supply chains. And he's attacking. Too much. It's too much.
Take a minute.
It's too much. Okay, let's hear some more about this from this wonderful man, our vice president.
Yes.
You have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail. Whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration.
Here we go. Here is a big one, all right? The whole thing about immigration. Vance will highlight, the record levels of foreign-born residents in Germany and the increased EU immigration from non-EU countries. And he's probably going to be linking this, I believe, if I remember correctly, to a car attack by an Afghan immigrant that recently occurred. So again, one outline event, right? Taking advantage of that moment to push an agenda. We've seen this with the FAA thing too, right?
Exactly.
To go after DEI and the ADA.
Yep.
Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree,
I gotta say one thing on this. You could easily make an argument that our U.S. militias, that many of them support the succession of states from the Union, right?
Yeah, they want smaller government.
And those are a lot of white people.
Imagine that.
Right.
And this also supports us, not, the hard stance on immigration for us with the wall.
Mm-hmm. But, like these others, these immigrants that do commit these atrocities, they are painted as extremists, but there are many militias that are extremists as well.
The Oklahoma City bombing.
All that kind of stuff.
That was an American extremist.
All that kind of stuff.
They voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, It is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
Wow, thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
See that if you just sort of have, like, abstractly sit back and you don't really pay attention to the message and you just sort of listen to the little clips of what he's saying, it sounds good. Mm-hmm. But what he is actually putting across there is the people are smart, that they can't get swayed by misinformation, which of course anybody can. You can get swayed by the misinformation. Why not fact check it?
Yes, and I completely agree. And I just kind of want to wrap up this a little bit. Here, let me see if I can get this on screen. I don't know if I can. Okay, I'll just go with it. I'll just read it off. Okay, so this is some themes that I want to highlight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the theme, and then I'm going to say how it was demonstrated in J.D. Vance's speech. Following that, Russian propaganda, and then the similarity between them. So first, immigration. Highlights mass immigration, links to Munich attack, criticizes EU policies. Russia pushes misleading claims suggesting causing migration crisis to destabilize Europe. Similarity, both focus on immigration as a security and cultural issue. Next theme, election integrity. JD criticizes election cancellations, for example, Romanian annulment due to Russian influence, Russian propaganda, mocks Western election decisions, promotes interference to question democratic legitimacy. Similarity, both accuse Europe of undemocratic election practices. Theme, freedom of speech. J.D. Vance, cities and cites cases like UK prayer conviction, Swedish Koran burning, German raids. Russian propaganda accuses Europe of censorship, for example, EU bans on RT, to argue for repression of views. Similarity, both claim Europe restricts speech, particularly conservative views. And there we go. That's it, in a nutshell. And there are more, and the effects are extreme. They are extreme, and the implications of these over a period of time are huge. I need to get into a bit more Project 2025, but they are huge. Where a lot of this is going is stripping away the administrative state and all of the policies that we have in place right now to support our society. So, for example, social services, in order to influence individuals to become completely dependent on the family unit.
Really?
Yeah. Your face is hilarious. But that is what's happening, right?
Yes.
We're removing social services because then how do you survive? The family unit.
How does that? I mean, we're barely surviving as a family unit right now. It's crazy.
It is.
It's almost like, what is he setting up for the next election, too? That's what I'm curious about. It's like he's setting the stage for what all this crazy misinformation that's going to happen during the next election after Trump.
It's very interesting time. A very interesting time.
It's terrifying.
And we will see how it plays out.
I'm played out.
You played out?
I'm played out.
All right.
There's so much I wanted to say and
it's like holding back. Holding back.
Yes.
All right. Well, maybe eventually that will be a just for subscribers stream.
Yeah, right?
Where Zach lets it all out.
Just freaks out on this guy.
Yep. All right. Well, everybody, I appreciate all that have watched. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some good information from this. And also just a few things to contemplate and think about.